had the opportunity previously to talk in front of the congregation, and I might be a one-trick pony where I have one kind of message about my faith and in my faith journey, and you'll hear it played out today. But really, it's about a faith practice. So I was trying to think about how I would talk about my faith journey, and probably what makes most sense is to talk about things chronologically. And I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably going to bounce around, just the way that my brain thinks about things and how I've experienced them, and what that faith practice looks like. So Kenny mentioned that I'm a born and bred Lutheran, which is very true. I was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, so heavy Lutheran area. We had gone to a Lutheran church growing up there. It was a little bit stricter than this church here. It was a Missouri Synod church, so I don't know if you guys are kind of familiar with the different types of Lutheran churches that we have in our denominations, but Missouri Synod has its own rules and quirks about it. And then we moved around. My family moved out to California. What's really interesting is when we moved out there, we started going to an ELCA church, which is like what we are. And when I think about some of the connections that I've started to make in my faith journey, and I'll talk more about faith bonds later, is Kyle Lortenson went to that church.
Really?
It's
Wow.
Ascension Lutheran out in Thousand Oaks, California.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. Which is just kind of crazy to think about. I don't know if you guys have experienced some of those small world things yet. And as you maybe go out and experience more things, you'll find that it's I've had somebody say it's a small world. That's kind of a common saying. And then I've heard someone say that it's a really small Lutheran world out there. But I've also had somebody tell me that it's not a small world. We're just living large. We're able to live out in really beautiful and large ways. So that's kind of a sentiment that I've held on to. Beyond California, I didn't actually know Kyle while I was out there. There's an age difference between us, and it was a really, really massive church. But the idea that we were out there at the same time is kind of crazy. I really grew up and went to high school and was kind of in your seats in Cincinnati, Ohio. And as I was growing up there and starting to do things, it was a regular practice for us to go to church every Sunday morning. That was something that my family was committed to doing. It was something that we were probably always in one of the first few pews. My mom liked to walk us up really close to the front of the sanctuary, and she was always really involved with the church. So it was kind of just our faith practice that's what we did. I was always participating in things like this, confirmation, First Communion, and I think there was a lot of input. I feel like if I reflect on that time, there was a lot of beliefs that were being taught to me, beliefs that were taught in forms of gospel and forms of from the Bible, from people around me, with songs, all these things that I felt like I was collecting, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I lived a pretty sheltered life, probably all the way up through the end of high school. I didn't have too many crazy outside factors that were happening. A lot of those beliefs weren't necessarily tested. Like they were just kind of stored in the back of my mind, and I was like, oh yeah, God is good, and Jesus loves everybody. Yep, okay, I definitely believe that. Yep, that checks out. I'll keep going to church. I'll keep going to mission trips. Mission trips were my favorite thing that we did. I had a strong youth group, really similar to this, and actually Kenny knows my youth group director, Mary Ellen. It's again a crazy small world, or maybe we're just living large. But when I think about how that faith journey continued, or maybe at this point it was a belief journey, was when I got to college, and unfortunately I went to Ohio State, and I know you're wearing a Michigan University of Michigan, so I'm sorry about that. We're just not going to get along.
Zach has the right shirt on.
Oh, Kenny, you test me. Thank you. Extra points. You guys are keeping score, right? So I went to Ohio State, and I remember being there my first year, and I was really lucky. My sister was also going there at the time. She was a senior, so I had this like piece of home that was with me. And what was really cool is we had, there was a Lutheran ministry right off campus. It was right behind all the fun bars that were on campus that I knew nothing about. And it was called Jacob's Porch. And it was, what I learned further on was it was an ELCA and Missouri Synod supported ministry that had been going on for years and years, and they were going through a little bit of a transition period with their pastors. And my sister and I don't think my sister had gone in her 3 previous years there, but I convinced her to go because there was another friend that had been from our church back home that was going there as well. And I remember telling someone in my dorm that I was headed out to church that night. They had a really weird time that they started services. It was always at 7:07 in the evenings on Sunday evenings. And it was just a weird time so that you would remember, not 7 o'clock, 7:07. And I mentioned to somebody in my dorm, and I had just met all these people. I said, hey, I can't do that. I'm going to church. And this guy looked at me. He was like, that's weird. I would have thought you were more pragmatic. Like, I wouldn't have pegged you as somebody as a religious person. You look too pragmatic. Which my first step as I thought about that was, okay, what does pragmatic mean again? Like, I didn't do that great on my SATs. So pragmatic is like your thinking is really like realistic and not theoretical. Like you're based in facts, and you're like a pragmatic person wouldn't just go out and spend all their money and give everything and the shirt off their back, right? Because they have to take care of themselves. And I just remember standing there, and I did not have a response to him. I had no idea what to say to that, right? I had years, I was 18 at that point, and I had all these years and beliefs that I had been collecting and taught, and I had no response. So I went to Jacob's Porch that night. I met my sister there. They had dinner for us. It was a space not dissimilar to this. They didn't have pews. They had a bunch of ragtag couches and futons sitting around, and it was the music was not what I was used to. There was no organ. I don't even think there was a piano. It was like drums and guitar, and I didn't really know any of the songs that were playing, and I didn't really like it, to be honest. It's like, this is not what I had been taught. This is not all the things that I had done up to this point. I probably didn't go back for 2 months, and I just continued on with life. Took a bunch of engineering classes, had way more math than I had ever expected to do in my first few years or weeks at college, and failed some midterms and all that fun stuff that is the beginning of college life. But then something happened. The pastor that I grew up with back in Cincinnati was called up to Jacob's Porch. And it was somebody that I had grown up with. He had been the pastor there growing up for like the last 7 years that I had been at that church. I was like, you know what? I guess I'll give Jacob's Porch another chance. And I went, and I still didn't really like it, but I decided I was going to go again because there was food there. And it was something to do on a Sunday night other than finishing my homework or studying, which I didn't really want to do. And I kept going. And then I met some people that were really nice. And then I met somebody that lived a couple floors below me because I I didn't realize, I recognized their face, but Ohio State's really big and there's like 60,000 people. So, okay, then I started, walking over with that person. Oh, okay, maybe we'll hang out like otherwise, or, and kept going and getting a little bit more involved with stuff at Jacob's Porch. And that became my new practice. And then it became a little bit easier to start talking about my faith. That was one of the things that I really appreciated as I continued to go to Jacob's Porch. Was it wasn't traditional. It wasn't what I was used to of sitting in church for, an hour on Sunday mornings and maybe going and participating in like a Bible study group. We did some really interesting things, like write down our fears and our anxieties and our insecurities on a piece of paper. And then we took it up to the altar and we burned it. It was fun. Or we would write stuff on stones. A lot of the stuff, I don't know if you guys ever came to our 517 services that we had here pre-pandemic, but a lot of stuff really similar to that. Interactive stuff that got me out of the headspace of just sitting there and taking in what the previous beliefs that I had were. So I think that was about the time where I started to realize that all the beliefs that I had learned and gathered really started to be tested. And then as they were tested and formulated, they really became part of my faith. So I don't know chronologically if we're still going here. Graduated from Ohio State and I picked a career that took me out to here. And I think I went to a few churches just looking around for something to maybe find where I was going to land, but it wasn't too important to me at first. It was kind of felt like I was back at the beginning of my college career where like I would go to a church and didn't really like it that much, and it was different from what I expected. By that time I liked what was happening at Jacob's Porch, and then going back to the old stuff kind of felt stiff. And I just couldn't find something that ticked all the boxes. I had a friend that also had moved out to DC. Was anyone at the service today? Did you notice one of the ushers, and I think she was wearing a red sweater, Carly?
I don't think so.
Okay, so Carly was in the back. She was helping out today. And we actually grew up in the same church in Cincinnati. And we went on mission trips together. We were extremely goofy together. Lots of SNL quoting and lots of shenanigans happening. We drove Mary Ellen crazy. But she also had moved out here and she was looking for a church to go to. And I remember there was a week where we had decided, okay, we'll go to Lord of Life at the recommendation of one of our pastors from back home. And it was a little bit further out from where we were looking because I lived in Arlington and she lived, I think she lived in DC at the time. And I couldn't go to that first church service. I was back in Cincinnati, I think. And I got a voicemail from her after that service, and she had just left. And she was crying, and she said, "I think I found the church. I found it. This is the one." And then the next week, because I had been invited to go to this church by her, ironically, she couldn't go that next week, so I had to go by myself. And I came here to the Fairfax campus, and it was a great service. It really spoke to me. The music was on point. It was all the things that I had learned from the faith journey, really, of when those beliefs had turned to faith, were kind of played out. And it wasn't the easy, here's what we believe, Jesus loves you, everyone's smiling as they walk out. I think it was Pastor Nathan that was preaching that week, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what you were preaching, but I remember being challenged by it. It challenged something, one of the beliefs that I had held previously in my mind. It was a belief that, and I don't even know if it was the old churches that had taught me that belief, or if it was society at large, or friends from Ohio State that I had collected a new belief from, but it challenged it, and I didn't have a response to it. So my response became, I think I need to come back. I think I need to go back and hear a little bit more about that. The other really cool thing about the faith journey as it continued that day was, as I walked out, you invited me to you said, hey, you should talk to Kenny because there's a young adults group that's starting up. And then you invited me out to the bar, which was great. Said, hey, are you free this Wednesday? Sure. And that was where I actually met Kenny. And that was where that became a practice of ours. All the young adults would go out to the bar on Wednesdays, and we would read through something that was kind of like our version of a Bible study. Mm-hmm. I would usually get a big plate of fries, maybe a beer, and we would talk about a podcast that we'd listened to or a blog or something. And that was another space where it was cool that we could test those beliefs and talk about our faith and practice talking about it. So I don't know if I've really hit it as much as I would have liked to, but really my faith journey has been a faith practice. Mm-hmm. As soon as it turned into from just believing things to putting them into that test mode, I don't know, as soon as they were pushed on by external forces, that's really where I've grown. And it hasn't been an easy ride. It's weird when some of those beliefs are pushed upon, right? And they might come in the form of somebody asking you like, oh, I didn't think that you were religious. That's weird. I thought that's not the opinion that I have of you. It's like not a fun thing to hear about somebody, because that's like, at that point I was like, that's part of my core identity. I go to church every week. Why would you not think that? But that's a I don't want to say a reasonable thing for somebody to ask, but that was their opinion of me. And I think going forward, one of the things that then became part of my faith journey and practice was practicing it, and then also inviting people into that fold. So the turning point and the responsiveness of people, you always have to make that ask. So Nathan pointing me to Kenny inviting me out, asking me to go to the bar, to participate in something. I think we're naturally just responsive people. And I think it's fascinating to see like how just a simple ask can change someone's complete faith journey, and how they act and go forward with things. So I've made it my practice to ask people to come to church. And that's where a lot of my friends have come from at this point is, I meet people and I'm like, hey, I'm going to church. Do you want to come? It's fun to be able to bring people in to walk and practice that faith with you. I don't think I really have like a conclusion, because I'm still on it. I'm still on the faith journey, still practicing. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But this is a part of that practice, talking about your faith. I didn't just like magically wake up one day and like have fully formed thoughts of talking about faith. It's something that I've practiced and talked about. That's why sermons don't just pop into your head, right? You've practiced giving sermons for just a few years. Same with Kenny. Same with Alma. She comes here and practices faith with you all. I think one of my other faith practices, and like one of the other things where I think about like, oh, is that pragmatic? Is that a reasonable way of thinking? Is I love music. Like that's one of the ways that I really connect with just spirituality. And I have tons of music on Spotify. I have all these playlists, but my favorite thing to do is just to put it on like all shuffle and there's like thousands of songs on there. But it's crazy, and I know there's algorithms, and it's probably not like truly a shuffle, whatever. But it's crazy how like sometimes the song that you need to hear comes on. Like whether it's a funny song or like a spiritual song, because I have a couple. The songs that we used to play at 517 are on there too. Well, like some of them are like, I don't know, Missy Elliott. But like I needed to hear Missy Elliott in that moment on that run because I needed to push through it. It was like a shuffle of like thousands of songs. What are the chances? What are the odds? I don't know. Is that pragmatic to think that like God had something to do with that? I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with somebody writing the algorithm that knew that I really needed to listen to Missy Elliott at that time. But it's like one of the fun things that I like think about often.
I think what I hear, the pragmatic part is you have a commitment to showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And like you guys are all here today, whether you want to be or not, you still showed up. And this is an emphasis for us as a family too, in the Swenson-Reinhold household. There are Sundays we're not feeling it, and we all go through periods of time in our faith when it's hard to believe, but the community gets us through, and having a commitment to showing up is important. When we go on vacation, we worship. We usually find an Episcopal church and we worship. Why? Because we don't take a vacation from faith. We show up. And I think that that's kind of like the core thing. Like our kids in our household, you don't confirm out of faith. Like our kids know when they go through confirmation, they're still expected to go to church every Sunday. Well, I'm not feeling it today, Dad. Tough. This is what we do. Dogs lick, Christians worship. It's just what we do. And we're not always feeling it. But when we put ourselves in a space to show up, God shows up too in some. Kenny said this before. Maybe you guys have heard him say, like, faith isn't taught, it's caught. Mm-hmm. And you can't be a disciple by yourself. It's a contact sport. You need other people. And so you put yourself in a position to be, which is a very practical thing to do. It's about as pragmatic as you could get, Alex. So they couldn't see that, but that was a compliment on the one hand. They just didn't understand how the pragmatism was actually playing out. I mean, you are a pragmatic human being, and that is a compliment.
I love spreadsheets.
You're very practical, but you also show up. You put yourself in a space to be invested in addition to invest. And for all of us, I think that's a big deal. Like, we're not always feeling this. That's not the point. The point is, you come to church, and there are grown-ups who know your names, other than your parents, and they give you a fist bump, or a hug, or a high five, and they're glad you have this community that's just bigger than your family. What's the value of that? And you get to come and you get to hear a young adult like Alex share his faith. Like, nobody twisted his arm. He chose this. You got to hear Janice, who's much older than Alex, talk about what's really been for her a hellacious last 3 years. Mm. But her showing up has allowed her to get through these really, really hard times because she's had this community to help. So anyway, I don't know, I hear that as a subtext.
Yeah.
90% of life is showing up. It's still showing up.
It's true.
Just show up. I'm not feeling it. Show up anyway. Let somebody put their arm around you. Our faith, my faith carries your faith when you're having a low faith day or no faith day. And there'll be a time when you'll do the same thing for me, right? That's how this works.
You talked about inviting people to church. I'm curious, how does it feel for you, and what's kind of your thought process when you do invite somebody? How does it feel when somebody takes you up on the invitation and says yes? How does it feel when they say no? Like, how do you prepare to ask somebody? How do you think about that? How do you respond to their responses?
Yeah.
Like, what's that all? Because asking somebody to come to church is, especially today's day and age, is hard and intimidating,
Yeah.
and you're really good at it.
Well, it's interesting in today's day and age, you know, because sometimes you can just send them a link.
That's true. That's true.
But I feel like I've run the gamut of like having been embarrassed asking people or like having asked it in a weird, awkward way. I definitely have gotten better at it. But usually it just stems from like a casual conversation. Like usually it starts, you know, and I guess you guys probably are at school, and I hope you guys don't have jobs yet. Enjoy life before you have to have a job. But like at work, it will just be a casual, like, what'd you do this weekend? And it's tied to showing up because it's easy to talk about faith and church when I have shown up, and it's kind of talking about something that I experienced. So when they ask like, hey, like, what'd you do? Oh, I went to church, or we have another, I think Wednesday, we're going to Caboose Brewery. I'm going to invite a friend to that because I know he likes beer and he lives close by. And I'm not going to like evangelize, like secretly evangelize him. Like I'd also said, hey, like this is a church, like church group that meeting up. Actually, it's Luke and Kathy.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll see if they come. But I've also had plenty of friends that I mentioned that I'm going to church, and they say yes, and then they don't show up. That's fine. Like there's like, it was really like it's no skin off my back. It costs $0 to ask somebody to come to church, right? It's an easy ask. It's just like 4 or 5 words. Now, sometimes at first, when I started asking people, there was like an emotional anxiety cost to that. But it got easier. And once you realize that the cool thing of when people do say yes, and then they get to come and maybe it is their cup of tea, or maybe that is something that they enjoy. I don't know if you guys, well, yeah, you guys have met Annie and Danny. Yeah, right? They come around here a lot. Danny, I can't believe I didn't talk about this. Danny was a random Craigslist roommate when he moved here of mine. I had a roommate that had moved out, and Luke listed different Luke, listed his room on Craigslist, and Danny showed up. And it was like a couple weeks into him moving in, and I was going to church that Sunday morning, and he like saw me leaving, and he was like, hey, where are you going? I was like, oh, I'm going to church. Do you want to come? Oh yeah, what kind of church is it? Oh, it's this Lutheran church out in Fairfax. Oh, that's weird. I grew up Lutheran. What? That's weird. And actually, the guy who moved out was also Lutheran. There's a weird, again, it's a small Lutheran world, and there's like a Lutheran magnetism. But then Annie moved in with him, and they got engaged, and now they're married, and
Yeah.
but like that was an easy thing to do, you know. It was.
And I got to do the wedding, which was a total blast.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
Fun trip to Minnesota.
Yeah, it was the second best wedding I've ever done.
Ooh.
Close second.
Yeah, but it runs the gamut of you know, having been easy asks of people, or awkward asks of, you know, people. Sometimes people just flat out say no, and that's fine. You know, maybe they'll find a different step in their faith journey or practice, and maybe where they're called to isn't Lord of life.
But transformation happens in contact.
Yep.
I mean, I hope you guys are hearing this piece, like just showing up and just having conversation with people. And it's the easiest way to help somebody else transform their life is just to invite them to be a part of the journey with you. You don't have to say anything profound. It's not about that.
No.
If God is real and the Spirit is showing up, the Spirit will take care of it.
Yeah.
Our job is just to faithfully invite, embrace, connect.
I think a thing that I have needed to unlearn going forward, and just as I, you know, progress, I'm hungry, further into my career and faith journey, and just in life, is worrying less about managing other people's expectations or their reactions to things. Like there's only so much control that I have, and if I like want to ask somebody or like casually mention that I'm going to church and then ask somebody and then I think, okay, well, if I ask it in that way, and then what if they get offended, and what if they, and the what ifs and the thinking through like the 20 things, I don't know where they are. All I can do is put the ask out there, and maybe that's what they needed in that moment. Maybe it's not. And then they'll say something, and then I'll say something back. But if you try to logic out the conversation in your head, you're gonna miss out what's actually happening in front of you.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to these awesome young people about their faith journey and where they're at and where they might be heading?
Yeah, it kind of ties back to what Nathan pulled out of what I was saying. It's showing up, and it's showing up to maybe some of the things that you don't necessarily want to go to, or if you're like, oh man, I have so much homework that I have to do, but there is youth group today. The homework will get done. If you're excited about going to youth group, or maybe if you're not excited about going to youth group that day, make time to show up. Go on the mission trips. Those are really fun times. Those are like, that's where Carly and I got so close, and it's cool to see her. Oh my gosh, I've been friends with her for 15 years. Those are the things that are fun, and that you'll, in 15 years, you'll be sitting and talking about your faith journey and talking about those experiences that you had.